The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa.
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna score! And we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.
Welcome. This is Wacky Wednesday on the Arrowhead Addict channel. I'm Adam Best here with Sterling Holmes and producer Joanne filling in for King Richard. He gets a much-deserved vacation. So thank you, Joanne, for helping us out today. Sterling, what's going on?
Yeah, man, just busy man. I'm excited to do this with you, even though there's nothing really new happening in Chiefs Kingdom.
Yeah, well, I listened to you and Josh yesterday. Josh, welcome to the AA fam. Was a big fan of that show yesterday. But I have some thoughts on Xavier Worthy, if you have a second. So I do not think it's anywhere close to hit the panic button yet. There's a cautionary tale that I want to bring up that might help some people digest this. Christian Watson, not the exact same body type, but a very explosive home run hitting wide receiver who has been a very promising player during his first 2 years, but has had kind of those first 2 seasons sabotaged by recurring hamstring issues, to the point where this offseason he had to go to some specialist at the University of Wisconsin. I guess the NFL is putting money, investing in this program to figure out how to come back from hamstring issues sooner because they are so problematic for NFL players. And what they found was over the course of this injury kind of sabotaging him, his left leg was 20% bigger than his right leg. And he spent this offseason trying to get down to a 6% discrepancy, which is pretty normal. That may not sound normal, but 6% is not detectable to the eye. 20% definitely is. So if you don't catch this thing early, it can be something that lingers and lingers and lingers. You think about Ken Griffey Jr., you think about Kevin Johnson, the basketball player. Some players have been really had this problem throughout their career. So I think it's important that you build your body up before you get to the NFL and you make it durable. That's what Patrick Mahomes has done. That's what Travis Kelce and Chris Jones have done. That I think is one of the most under-discussed elements of the big three here in Kansas City. They stay on the field. And it takes getting your body ready for that and not letting issues like this hamstring issue plague you. So it's only June. If this is still an issue, preseason week 1, you have my permission to hammer that panic button.
I said I was a 2 out of 10. I'm not really worried about it. I'm not worried. 2 out of 10 is very unworried. I'm nonplussed. I just does not buy. We are June 12th. All right, though. Before we get into our show, I do want to give a shout out to DraftKings, and DraftKings is now offering a no sweat bet sign up bonus for new users. New customers who sign up with code Arrowhead and deposit at least $5 will receive a no sweat bet up to $1,500 bonus on their first wager. This means if you place a first bet of $50 and you lose, you will receive a $50 credit in bonus bets straight to your account, up to $1,500. You will also receive one single game parlay reward every day. Using our code Arrowhead not only gets you these great bonuses, but also directly supports our podcast. So if you've been considering signing up for DraftKings, make sure you use the code Arrowhead to maximize your first bet. This offer is only available to new customers who are 21 plus and physically present in legal gambling states. Please remember to always gamble responsibly and check the episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify.
Well, since we don't really have any news other than maybe Brian Cook looks healthy. I mean, there just really isn't anything to talk about. So this is another great week to do some big picture thinking. And Andy Reid, Brett Veach, and the big three, Spags probably as well. I don't think he's likely to be a head coach again. they are mainstays in this dynasty, but it's been hard for anybody else to become a mainstay. So I thought we'd analyze 13 players who were kind of at a crossroads moment and look at whether they can become a mainstay in this dynasty and what they need to do to either emerge as a star or get another contract.
I love it. Let's do it, baby.
So let's start. I think the obvious place to start is the young contract year guys: Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. Nick Bolton, are you going to have to recuse yourself from this one as a big Mizzou guy?
No, I think he's back. I understand people's concerns with his style. I think he is the IQ guy defensively. I think he's the almost captain defensively, if you will. Like Justin Reed's the physical captain. Chris Jones is the best player, so he can be a captain. But I think even though we all love Drew Tranquill, I love Drew Tranquill. I think it's Nick Bolton. He's the green dot. He's the guy that gets everyone in place. He is the mouthpiece on the field for Steve Spagnuolo. The linebacker market's not crazy necessarily, although he is going to most likely get a lot of money. The Chiefs have traditionally not spent a ton here. I think Anthony Hitchens is the guy you look at, but they've spent more here than on second contracts, as well as offensive line, center specifically. I think Nick Bolton's back. I think it's going to be on a just under market value deal, right? I do think there's something to him playing at the University of Missouri. I think the Chiefs value Nick Bolton a little more than other teams because I think they value the leadership aspect more. He's not Roquan Smith. He's not, but he's a damn good linebacker, and he fits very well in this system. He is their best run-stopping linebacker by far. I think Nick Bolton gets a second contract here in Kansas City.
So surprise, surprise, I'm going to push back a little bit here. And I think best case scenario, Nick Bolton really improves and becomes a true star because he makes a leap in pass coverage. For me, that's what I would need to see to bring him back. And I don't know, the Chiefs might bring him back. I think you've obviously pointed out why he has value to Steve Spagnuolo. But where I would push back is if you're Brett Veach, you have shown that despite some constraints, you do have some constraints because you have an owner that doesn't want to get too crazy in the credit card. You have a big contract in Patrick Mahomes, a big contract in Chris Jones. You have an expensive offensive line. And where have you been investing your limited capital? Premium positions. You've been putting it into these last 3 years. If you look at trades, free agency, and the draft, it's offensive tackles. It's offensive line in general, but wide receivers a ton, edge a ton, a little bit of cornerback with Trent McDuffie. I think he goes to Steve Spagnuolo and says, Steve, I know what Nick means to you. He's one of the smartest players in the league. I don't want to, personally, I don't want to minimize what Nick Bolton can do and be on the football field. But if you're paying for leadership and intangibles, this team has more intangibles and leadership and championship swagger than any team in the league. You do not, and that goes for Justin Reed too. You do not need to overpay for that at a position where it's getting harder and harder to be a standout because of quarterbacks playing out of structure, because of motion and the spread out nature of the game and the ingenuity of modern offenses. I just don't know if they have the luxury of affording Nick Bolton. And this is going to go for Justin Reed too. And I think if you're Steve Spagnuolo, you say, hey, Steve, look what you've done with Drew Tranquill. Look what you've done with Mike Edwards. You can turn, you can kind of turn anything into gold. So that would be my pushback. I think Nick Bolton needs to take a step forward in pass coverage to definitely.
He did last year. He took a step forward last year.
He did. But I think he needs to kind of there's some pretty good money going to linebackers. And I think he needs to kind of step towards the bottom of that Roquan, Fred Warner tier to be worth it financially from my perspective.
Yeah. My final thought on this before we move on is I think the Chiefs have the writing on the wall of him bringing him back. They let Willie Gay Jr. walk. Yes, Drew Tranquill signed the contract. You can make the case that, okay, hey, Nick, look, we have your replacement in case you don't want to take a semi-team friendly deal. But they didn't draft a linebacker. I think if they were going to find a replacement and be prepared to let him walk, they would have drafted a linebacker in the 3rd, 4th round. In my opinion, to me, you're not just go into next year saying, okay, we lose Nick Bolton and we're going to go all in with Drew Tranquill and a rookie. I love Leo Chenal. Maybe they think that he could take that Nick Bolton role. I don't know. I just think that the signs are pointed to Nick Bolton coming back more so than they are not.
And that's an excellent point, because if you look at Trey Smith, who we'll get to in a second, if you look at Reed, if you look at Noah Gray, their replacements have basically been drafted. They did not draft or sign a replacement for Nick, unless you consider Drew Tranquill that replacement. But, they only really have him and Leo Chenal. So I think you might be right that they might bring him back, but it does worry me a little bit with their limited capital. Let's move on to Creed Humphrey. And this has been a topic of some heated discussion, because I think there are a lot of Chiefs fans and analysts who think, well, hey, they let Rodney Hudson walk. They let Mitch Morse walk. I would argue that Creed Humphrey is not only a superior player, a definitive top 3 center in the league, but this is a different era of Chiefs football. Brett Veach has shown us, if there is an area of emphasis that he prioritizes above all others, it is the offensive line. So I would be pretty shocked if they let Creed Humphrey walk. And I know he had a little bit of a low snap problem last year. I think that's a dozen plays a year. I think that is something that can be corrected. I think what Creed needs to do is just maintain his current level of play, and he's an easy decision to bring back. Are you on board with that, or do you see it differently?
No, I see it similarly. My concern, and we'll just go ahead and put both of them together, Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, because I think you can't talk about one without talking about the other one. Because I think one of these two guys are going to come back next year. I don't think both are gone. I would be shocked if both were not, or if neither were extended by the Kansas City Chiefs. I would also be pretty surprised if both were extended by the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a lot of money on the offensive line. You still have Joe Tooney. We'll get to him. Jawan Taylor, we'll get to him. They want to have a good offensive line. Obviously, that's nothing new, but especially on the interior, right? That has kind of been their calling card. Most teams try and build by the tackles. The Chiefs kind of built on the inside here. So I think at least one of those guys are back because of the simple fact you don't want to lose 2 to 3 of those interior guys who make up one of the best interior lines in the NFL. That's a lot of change, a lot of turnover, a lot of what-ifs for the $500 million quarterback, Patrick Mahomes. I think Creed Humphrey is the guy they extend, and here's why. I get the thought process of the centers, and I'm in agreement. I think he's a top 3 center at minimum right now in the NFL. I love Trey Smith. Love Trey Smith. This is not a knock on Trey Smith. I think he's going to get paid more money than the Chiefs can afford at guard. I think he's going to get Rob Hunt money. Mm-hmm. That's 5-year, $100 million. Chiefs aren't going to pay that for a guard and pay a center. So what it comes down to is I think Trey Smith is a Pro Bowl-esque type of guard, right? On the cusp of a Pro Bowl. Really good. I don't think he's elite, but I think he's really damn good. Creed Humphrey, to me, is an elite all-pro, as we've seen, center. Center's also cheaper than guard. Center's also the guy who typically has the best rapport, you would hope, with the quarterback. I want the battery, like in baseball, pitcher-catcher, quarterback, to remain the same. I think when the Chiefs drafted Creed Humphrey, they drafted him as okay, you are now the center for the foreseeable future with Patrick Mahomes. I think he's been even better than expected, but when you draft a center in the second round, you expect that. So I think it's Creed Humphrey getting the second contract in Kansas City, while Trey Smith is going to get absolutely paid on the open market and paid as so much that a team-friendly deal wouldn't even make sense for him, because I think it's going to I think he's getting just an absurd contract next year.
Yeah, the guard market heated up to the point it got a little out of control this offseason, to the point where Joe Tooney's contract looks reasonable for, I don't think he's the best guard in the league. I think he's the best pass blocking guard in the league. Trey Smith is a very good player. I think you're right putting him top 12, just outside the top 12, top 15, that area. Creed Humphrey is a unique specimen. I mean, if you look at his relative athletic score, he is the tippy top of the top when it comes to center prospects. And I think you're right. He does have that rapport with Patrick Mahomes. He looks like if you think about where this franchise has been recently and where it's going, a future Hall of Famer. I don't think this is any knock on Trey Smith, but if we're saying Nick Bolton and Creed Humphrey are both coming back, there's just no more room. You can't afford Trey Smith. I think someone else is going to throw the bag at him, and I don't expect him to be back. I think that's why they drafted who they drafted this past draft, right?
That's the whole thought process. That was my go-to with Nick Bolton, and it's the same thing here. Unless you're going to say Hunter Norzad is going to all of a sudden swing in and play center, I think he could, as before. I think he's more of a guard, and then you have, obviously, C.J. Hansen as a developmental guard. So, again, I think they may have drafted, maybe, we'll see, Trey Smith's replacement because they understand the contract's going to be so large. And if you're Trey Smith, you were a 6th-round draft pick. You already had the medical situation. If you're him, and it's going to be a tough decision, do you stay in Kansas City for most likely less money, or do you go say, all right, I was a 6th-round draft pick. I've yet to make my money in the NFL. The shirts are great. They're great shirts. But let's be real now. He's going to get paid. It's going to be hard for him to turn that down, especially security-wise, when he has had in the past that medical issue.
He's had a couple of rings, too. I think he's had his success. What would Trey Smith have to do to kind of change the calculus here? Would he have to kind of clean up some of his rough edges as a player and become even more technically sound? Would he have to kind of step up into that upper stratosphere of guards? I
don't know if he can, because if he does, he's getting paid even more than that. I think right now he's looking at Robert Hunt money. If he became like Joe Tooney or Lindstrom, then you're probably looking at 5 for 115. It'd be so. I'm not kidding them. That's what I would assume those guys would get on the open market at his age. Right, age is going to be a factor here too. It's going to be hard. They're going to have to make a cut somewhere between these three because you can't, as great as it is, when you draft great players, you can't always afford to keep all of the great players. It's what it makes the NFL so great. It's why it's way better than baseball in regards to the level playing field, right? The salary cap. It makes it okay. You drafted great. Congratulations. You get a 4/5 year advantage. When that's up, good luck paying everyone. It's just the nature of the beast. And again, it's why parity is so impressive. And it's why the Chiefs run, the dynasty is so impressive because, again, it's just the NFL's built for parity. It's not built for dynasties.
Can't say it any better than that. Let's move on to the prove it guys. This is a category, whether it's Hollywood Brown on a 1-year deal, or some of these other guys who really need to break through and have limited chances to either stick or earn that next contract. Let's start with Hollywood Brown. I think he's kind of a long shot to be back, but is there a scenario where Rashee Rice kind of flakes out, Xavier Worthy is not really ready for prime time, and Hollywood Brown, maybe even with Travis Kelce tapering off a tiny bit, Hollywood Brown becomes the 1B for Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes wants him back. And Hollywood Brown, he's made a lot of money. Maybe he wants to stay with Patrick Mahomes. Is that even feasible if he has a near 1,000-yard season?
If Hollywood Brown has a great year, he's gone. And that's what it comes down to. We all saw the wide receiver market. We understand what that's like. It's crazy. It's insane. Again, the Chiefs have done such a good job bringing people in. And as much as we like to say Mahomes' contract is a deal, it is hypothetically, realistically, it is as well. It's still a second contract for a quarterback. It's not like he's getting paid $15 million a year, right? He's getting paid a lot. Same with Chris Jones. You look what the Bengals are going through, what the Bills are going through. Like, when your quarterback is on that second contract, you can't pay everyone. As much as we want to keep everyone here, you can't do it. Hollywood Brown, if he goes for a K or more, he's getting Christian Kirk money. He's going to get Christian Kirk money. At a minimum, Christian Kirk money. I don't know if the Chiefs can afford to pay that. I think Xavier Worthy, again, is kind of a, all right, you learn from Hollywood. You follow him. You learn from him. Then rookie contract. And I think that's what the Chiefs are going to do. Find a way to go cheap with the quarterback on a non-rookie contract. You want to give him a decent defense, and you want to protect him. So you have to cut costs somewhere. You do it at running back, and they're looking like they're doing it at wide receiver. They're saying, hey, Mahomes can elevate his wide receivers. He can't elevate the defense. So they're going to keep throwing draft capital early draft capital at wide receivers. You hope you hit on them, and then you have them for 4 or 5 years. That looks like the strategy the Chiefs are going for. I think this is a 1-year deal for Hollywood. I think it works out great. I'm excited for it this year. It's going to be phenomenal. He probably helps the Chiefs three-peat, and then Hollywood maybe goes to Hollywood on a large contract.
Totally agree with you. I think what the Chiefs have done is they still value the wide receiver as if it's a premium position, but they've decided, hey, we can't spend $30 million a year on a wide receiver when we have Patrick Mahomes, nor do we need to. So we'll just kind of do that Pittsburgh Steelers plan thing where we draft somebody in the first, second, or third round every single year, and we trade them or let them walk. And we just do that in perpetuity. We never stop. It's just we're constantly reloading for Patrick Mahomes, and we're spending a different kind of premium capital than cap, which we have a limited amount of. I think that's the plan. So regardless of him coming back or not, which I think we both agree is unlikely, what's the best case scenario for Hollywood Brown? I think we've mentioned in the past that maybe 1,000 yards is the ceiling. What is the floor? Is there a scenario where that foot continues to plague him and he just can't really stay in the field every week and he only puts up 400 yards? Is something like that possible?
I mean, anything's possible. In the words of Kevin Garnett, anything is possible. No, man, it's hard projecting injuries, but even if he plays, let's say 14 games, let's just say it flares up a couple games, he plays 14, I think you're still looking at a minimum like an 800, 850-yard receiver. Like at a minimum. I think he's going to be utilized a ton in this offense, not just deep balls, but all over. I mean, he talked today and he was talking about that, the utilization of him. He's going to get his fair share. I was kind of, I don't want to say down, but I said he's probably going to be around a 900, 950-yard receiver this year. But if he went over 1,000 or even 1,100, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I would not be shocked at all. I think early on, he's going to get a ton of targets, a ton of receptions, and maybe the numbers get actually bolstered early on before you see the emergence of Xavier Worthy as well as Rashee Rice coming back. But no, man, I expect Hollywood Brown to be utilized early and often and not just on the deep ball in this offense.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. And I think if you look at Hollywood Brown historically, there haven't been that many moments where he's played with a great, healthy quarterback for a prolonged period of time. I mean, Lamar Jackson and Kyler Murray have both been oft injured. These aren't pass-first offenses. So I don't really think Hollywood Brown has ever been put in the optimum position for sustained success. I think he's going to be in the best situation he's ever been in before, and he's going to shine in year one and maybe year one and done in Kansas City because he's kind of on that Juju Smith-Schuster plan. I think that's how we're seeing it. Let's look at Charles Omenihu next. Charles Omenihu tore his ACL in the AFC Championship game in Baltimore, unfortunately, because he was really showing some juice and was a major factor down the stretch, basically getting a sack or more every single game to close out the season into the postseason. His contract is up. He has a 2-year deal with the Chiefs. I think it's a reasonable bargain. It's something like $13 million a year. I believe part of that was because he was buried on a San Francisco line with a lot of talent. And then also he had the kind of domestic situation off the field. Maybe those two factors depressed his value a little bit. I think he's going to want to come back into season playoffs, show out, earn the bag. So I don't think we think he's going to be back, right? But
I think he's a guy who wants his money. He's tweeted about it. He's tweeted about my value and all, which is kind of funny. Charles Omenihu is a great player, and he really wants to work back and be a stud, and I think he will. I think Charles Omenihu is a very underrated player, but you missed how many games last year? You're going to miss how many games this year? What did you expect to happen? You're going to get a new large contract? Yeah, you were great in the games you played. That's also pre-injury now. I really like Charles Omenihu, but there is a case of, okay, well, now you have to prove it for a full season. You playing 8 games at a really high level is great. You're going to have a chance to play 8 games at a high level again now post-injury, most likely. I feel bad for him, but that's the nature of the NFL. The NFL doesn't care. NFL says you are going to have to prove it. Every year in the NFL is almost a prove-it year. It's how it works. if he comes back and only plays in 4 or 5 games, 6 games, maybe the Chiefs can keep him. If he plays in 8 games into the playoffs and he's an absolute stud again like last year, some team's going to take a chance. And by chance, I mean, well, a lot of damn money. I think it also depends on FAU. I think Charles Omenihu is a perfect fit for this Kansas City scheme as far as he can go inside and outside. I think if Spags had his druthers, you'd bring Charles Omenihu back almost at any cost because he fits so damn well in that system and scheme. I do think, though, it is going to come down to FAU because you know what you have in Mike Dana. Mike Dana's a good rotational guy. I don't think you want to be in a starter. George Karlaftis, stud. You want him being your starter. I think it comes down to what does FAU do this year, and then how good does Omenihu play when he comes back? If there's some rust and it drives his value down, I see the Chiefs bringing him back. If he's a stud when he comes back and that value comes too high and FAU takes a step forward, it's going to be hard to retain him.
You never know. We thought Mike Dana wouldn't be back, and here he is. The Chiefs got a good deal on him. Of course, maybe the market for one reason or another was a little depressed, or people didn't value him as much as he's valued in Kansas City system. I think there's going to be a great market for Charles Omenihu if he comes back and looks as strong as he did, because his pass rush win rate, his numbers, especially when you move him inside, it is off the charts. And when you have a guy who's a really good edge, who you can kick inside 10, 12 plays a game, and guards just cannot block him. No. And he's just very disruptive, making sacks, forcing fumbles, blowing up offenses. That is kind of a rare piece on the defensive line, and someone's going to value that. So I think it all depends on whether he comes back strong or not. And I'm not one of these guys, and I know you're not either, who gets into the off-season Instagram or social media video hype stuff. But he does seem to be on schedule, working hard, and really focused on making it back.
Yeah, I cannot wait for him to come back because he makes that defensive line so much better. He really does.
This one is going to be maybe the most fun one on the list. Jawan Taylor. So his range of outcomes is crazy. Because on tape sometimes and on paper, he seems like a guy that you could project to be one of the better right tackles in the league, but that's not really what happened last year. And I think we saw the penalties. He got slammed with penalties early and often. And was it fair? I don't know, but you see other guys like Lane Johnson doing the same thing and not getting called as much. But hey,
not lining up like that though. I had more issues with him lining up. I had issues. I mean, I had issues when they were calling him for jumping early. I thought that was a little at times premature. When he was lining up off the line of scrimmage, you got no one to blame but yourself. Especially when a guy is that athletic and that quick as Jawan. He doesn't need the extra help. Like Jawan Taylor is good enough, athletic enough that shouldn't make that big of a difference. That's mental at that point to me.
I
think he bounces back, though. I like his upside. I will still never be a fan of the original signing based on the contract. I think I was the first one to really be like, guys, I love Brett Veach. It's fine. I mean, like, it's Brett Veach. He'll find a way to still win championships here in Kansas City, and I can still find ways to say, hey, that wasn't my favorite move. But Jawan Taylor's going to be here this year. He's more than likely going to be here next year. It's 2026, that's the year. Because even in 2025, the dead cap money is 29.4, but that is cut pre-June. Post-June, looks like you can save a 25. There's a lot of money. I'm trying to figure out how to read that right there. But based on his designation, there's still going to be money against the books based on when you cut him, whether it's next year or 2026. I think he's here this year. I think more than likely he's probably still here next year. But he does have a wide array of outcome because if he becomes a stud and he becomes a top 3 right tackle in football, he's here the entirety of that contract. If he does what he did last year and he's getting penalized early on in the season, and let's just say Kingsley Suamataia wins out at left tackle, I would not be surprised if Wanye Morris started taking snaps away from him at right tackle. I really wouldn't. It's the whole Lou Holtz thing. You threw 13 interceptions last year. You won't throw 13 this year. Why? Are we running a new offense? No, because I'm sitting your ass once you get to 12. If Juwan Taylor starts getting a ton of penalties again early on, the Chiefs' offensive line at tackle is deeper this year than I think last year was. Whether your thoughts are on Kingsley or Wanye, where they fit. So, you're right. Juwan Taylor has the widest array of outcomes. Either this year goes great and he's here for 4 years total, or this year's a disaster and he's losing PT to Wanye Morris.
And we'll go back to one of your favorite points, the sunk cost fallacy. The Chiefs have shown before with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, a first-round pick, that they will replace you with a seventh-round pick. They're not going to, they have a very good way of looking at things like, what are you today? What are you now? And not thinking about the past. I think that's the way they're going to approach Juwan Taylor. I agree with you. A lot of it last year was psychological. I think the penalties and not being able to really push getting off early sort of got in his head, right? And I'm hoping he's with a sports psychologist. He's with Duke Manyweather, some kind of offensive line guru. He's really working to get himself right pre-snap this offseason because he just can't afford to be plagued by penalties and being in his head as much as he was last season. This is a very talented player. He's a dancing bear. He's got great feet. Physically, he's everything you want in a tackle. And what's crazy to me is I agree with you. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a Pro Bowler at the end of the season. And I wouldn't be surprised if Wanye Morris took his job coming out of the bye. It could go either way. And I have no clue which way it's going to go. I'm hopeful that they'll get it right because I think the Chiefs have a way of figuring things out, but they don't always figure things out. We thought Sky Moore was going to have a better sophomore year. He had a worse sophomore year. So that's where I'm at with Juwan Taylor. I think we're pretty united on that front. This next one is fun. I don't think a lot of people think it's really a prove-it season for him, but I believe it is. Joshua Williams, his physical talent is tantalizing. We haven't really seen it fully manifest on the field as of yet. Do you think with L'Jarius Sneed out of the way, he steps into the forefront and becomes a starting caliber corner in the National Football League?
Yes. Yes, I do. I think Jalen Watson is a really good third corner. I think Jalen Watson is a really good third corner. I think he's going to be up and down. It's funny because we all came out with Joshua Williams being the low floor, high ceiling guy, but it's kind of been Watson who's been the more inconsistent player. Again, he's made some massive plays. I think you take that all day with Jalen Watson, especially where he was drafted for, sure. But even in general, I think Jalen Watson is a really good CB3. I think Williams has the ability to be a really good CB2. The physical traits, as you mentioned, are tantalizing. And I've liked what he's done so far. I'm really impressed with Joshua Williams coming from a small college and then looking at where he is now. I've always been a big Joshua Williams fan, so maybe I'm being a little biased here, but I think Williams is a guy that takes a huge step forward, locks down one of the outside CB spots, and you're going, okay, yeah, the Chiefs can literally just draft and develop anyone. They know exactly what they're looking for in the draft because Williams, I think, is going to follow in that mold. By the way, Alan F., love your point. Production and performance will win out. That's when we were talking about Juwan Taylor. And then No Way says, Sterling, when are you going to get a mic stand? I'm looking. Okay, I thought I had 2 at my house. I have tried 3 different mic stands. This thing, it's thick. It's a thick mic stand, okay? And it's really hard to try and find a mic stand to fit this thick bad boy. Okay, it's tough.
Too much girth.
I need. Yeah, I'm on the hunt for a Magnum mic stand. We'll find one eventually. Don't put your head down, Best. Don't put your head down. Don't sigh.
Back to Joshua Williams.
Oh, I thought we were talking. I can't do it. It's going to be another joke. I'm sorry. But yes, No Way. I appreciate it. I'm looking for a new mic stand.
Joshua Williams, I think, hasn't gotten all the way there because physically he has the potential, the size and the potential to be the next guy in the lineage of L'Jarius Sneed and Charvarius Ward. Can he do it? I'm not sure, but I do trust defensive backs coach Dave Merritt. I do trust the front office to draft these guys. And then Steve Spagnuolo obviously is going to put you in the best position to succeed. He wasn't that late of a draft pick, right? If I'm remembering correctly, fourth round, right? Fourth round. So I think that's a guy that you don't expect to be a superstar by any means. But if the Chiefs of all teams are picking a corner in the first 3 or 4 rounds, I think they expect that guy to be a starter. This is kind of the make or break year for him. I think he's a good enough player to stick in the league for quite some time. But if he's going to become a high quality starter, I think 2024 is his year.
His PFF grade last year was 73, which is pretty damn solid for a cornerback. So take that as you will. We'll see what happens in a larger sample size, obviously, whether that makes it go up because, okay, now he's feeling comfortable. He's not worrying about things. Will it go down because now he's getting exposed? But this is a huge prove-it year, not even contract-wise, just a huge prove-it year for Joshua Williams in general. If he sticks around 73 or a little bit higher, I think you're sitting here going, yeah, that's a big step forward.
And it could be a huge payoff for the Chiefs. They move on from L'Jarius Sneed, save $20 million or so, and they have, let's say, 80% of his ability kind of backfilled. That would really help their defense stay afloat at the kind of elite level we saw last year. Next up is what we're calling second-year projects. Let's start with Felix and Udike Uzoma. Didn't see a lot of him last year, kind of buried on the depth chart. Really got a slow start. I don't know if it was because of injuries or what, just didn't get a lot of reps either in the offseason or in the season. Do you think he can turn it around and still realize his draft capital? Maybe not fully this year, but start that ascent.
Oh, yeah. Again, these two guys we're going to talk about, I've been higher on than most, so this is probably no surprise, just me being consistent here with these two dudes. I think FAU takes a big step forward. I'm not saying he's going to go out and have 8 or 9 sacks, but I think you see him 5 sacks, maybe 6 sacks, around there. You're going to see him play a good amount, and I think early on with Amenahu out especially, you'll see him and Mike Dana. I think you're going to like FAU, especially on obvious passing down situations. We knew he was young coming out. It's a sunk cost where you drafted him at this point. I like FAU. I just knew last year was a redshirt year, and everyone expected him to be a stud because of where he was drafted and because George Karlaftis was so good as a rookie. They also needed George Karlaftis as a rookie. They didn't need FAU last year. There wasn't a real good look at him as far as his ability and availability to get on the field because of one injury to himself as well as the guys in front of him. I think FAU is going to have a really nice year. It still might not be enough for people to, because they're going to say, well, look where he was drafted. Okay, but if he gets 5 sacks this year and is making an impact, I don't care where he was drafted. That's a big step forward. So I think he takes a big step forward.
The whole look at where he was drafted thing, for the Chiefs, these guys are glorified second rounders, right? They're not picking a guy in the top 15 that you're expected to be a surefire star. That second half of the first round, especially that bottom 3 or 4 where they pick every single year, that's not as guaranteed as other guys. And I think Felix, if you look at his journey and his frame, he's been a little bit of a late bloomer. If you look at pictures of him when he signed to Kansas State, he was rail thin, man. He did not look like an edge. You know me, I am a huge Charles Omenihu fan. So I wanted them to make that signing. I predicted them to make that signing, and I was over the moon when they made that signing. But the downside of that was King Felix, he was going to be put on the back burner a little bit his rookie season. So maybe the silver lining on Charles Omenihu being injured is FAU is kind of thrust into the limelight a little bit, forced to play more snaps than he would have under the original plan. And hopefully that can speed up his development, and we can see some of the flashes that we saw when he was dominating his last year in the Big 12. I feel pretty good about Felix. I don't know that I feel as confident in him as George Karlaftis, but I actually think because he's got a little bit more bend, a little bit more wiggle, his ceiling might be higher, but his floor is definitely lower.
I like this comment from Randy. Says, not drafting Sam Laporta still haunts me. And I'm with you because I think a lot of folks wanted Sam Laporta. We all saw what he was again, I'm the first to admit when I'm wrong, and I don't understand how to identify and develop tight end talent. I still thought Sam Laporta would be solid. I don't know if I saw the value in the first round because I'm typically always against first round tight ends. So I'm not necessarily in this camp, but I think the majority of folks were. My only pushback is I think they were looking defensive line help majority at this point. I think they were. I don't know how much Sam Laporta was legitimately on the board for them at 31. I think they were looking defensively and specifically defensive line. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong here. But that was kind of my understanding. If that's the case, it wasn't like it was filled with a plethora of stud defensive linemen that you go, oh, they should have obviously drafted that guy. Not really.
Yeah, and who was the guy from Georgia? The
guy from Alabama, Byron Young, who went to, or was it Byron Young that went to the Raiders?
No, that's not who I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of the guy from Georgia who went to the Eagles.
Oh, one pick before. Yeah,
that everyone was going crazy about and didn't do much last year. I really was on the tight end, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta train. I really like that idea. From a Chiefs perspective, though, even though the NFL has done a much better job integrating, especially these move tight end types, these kind of glorified receivers, historically, first-round tight ends have not been a good bet. The other thing is they hit on a third-rounder with Travis Kelce. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I think
I mean, that's
well, I'm not saying that
come on.
I'm not saying that they think they're going to find another Travis Kelce. I just think they're looking at the history of tight ends. I don't necessarily agree with this in the modern era because it's never been more important and it's never been easier to integrate these guys. But if you look at George Kittle, if you look at the long list of these guys that have hit, more of them have hit arguably from outside the first round than inside the first round. So I think they were justified in doing that, even if, my God, how much fun would it be to have Sam Laporta and Travis Kelce next to each other? I mean, that you'd have defensive coordinators jumping off bridges.
Yeah,
but
let's move on before I get depressed.
Yeah.
Wanya Morris. I said it was my favorite pick last year in the draft. I'm always a fan of building in the trenches. That's offense and defensive line. In general, I think building in the trenches is a good way of developing a long-term successful team. I mean, for all the talk about the Lions and their turnaround, I think the best point to is obviously Aiden Hutchinson defensively, but they have one of, if not the best offensive line in football, right? That was a big reason why the Lions got turned around. I think Wanya Morris best fits as a right tackle. I think Kingsley Suamataia best fits as a left tackle. I don't know what that means for this year, though. Juwan Taylor's here this year no matter what. No matter what, he's here. So what does that mean? That means there's really only one job open. That's left tackle. Can Wanya Morris hold off Kingsley Suamataia for one more year at left tackle, then make a transition to right tackle? Could be the case. Are they going to say, yeah, but for the long-term outlook, we want Kingsley to get this job because we believe he's the future left tackle going forward, so there might be some ups and downs, but we got to get it out of the way now. Also could be, if this were me, I'm probably going Wanya Morris early. I think he takes a big step forward. I say offensive line, tackles. You see the biggest jump from year one to year two. So the bad of last year starts to get washed away while the good starts to become the norm. That's why I believe pass protection, run block, and that's how that works in my eyes. So I think Wanya Morris is going to have a pretty good leg up on the competition heading into this upcoming season. Training camp and preseason, especially preseason, are going to be very important for both of these two guys. Against legitimate competition, against other teams, I think you're looking at about a 50-50 chance of which one of those guys are starting week one. I'm still high on Wanya, but I don't want him to. If he sits this year, then you start having the Lucas Niang concerns. Little different because Niang got injured, set up for COVID. I understand that. But you start having those, oh my gosh, did we waste a second or third rounder on a swing tackle who, quite frankly, is never going to play?
Yeah, but if you find an Andrew Wiley type, that kind of guy can be more valuable than you think. And I think the best case scenario for not necessarily Wanya Morris, but the Chiefs is if Kingsley
Suamataia.
Suamataia. If Kingsley Suamataia, Jesus. If he reaches his gargantuan, potential and becomes a true kind of prototype left tackle, I don't think it's going to be immediate. But then you have on the other side, Jawan Taylor becoming what you paid for. And that's an elite right tackle. And then Wanye Morris is the high value swing tackle who provides insurance if Big Kingsley or Jawan goes down for an extended duration of time. You would be very rock solid at the tackle position if that happens. I'm on the fence on Wanye because on one hand, he had some good moments. I liked some of his run blocking. He played really well in advantageous matchups. On the other hand, and this would happen to a lot of players, especially a lot of rookies. But when he was on the field with a Max Crosby or a Khalil Mack, he looked completely out of his league. He looked like the raw rookie from Oklahoma who everybody said wasn't ready. And we'll have to see if he can mature from that player and become more player than project, or if he's another Lucas Niang. Not much more to say, really, is there?
No, I just think you're wrong and I'm right. So that's what we're going to – I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
When is that the case on this program? Let's look at left for dead receivers. Let's just lump these two guys together, Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore. At this point, what is the best case scenario for these guys? Is it wide receiver 4? Is there some kind of reemergence that sees them actually becoming a starter? And what's the floor? Is the floor not even making the damn roster?
Yes, for both. I think the ceiling is wide receiver 4. I think at this point, it was awesome when Toney rearranged his gloves and made a catch. That was super cool. That's it. It was cool when he made the special teams play, and that's where I think you might actually see the biggest input and impact from him, and also why I think you might have a better chance of seeing Toney on the active roster than Sky. With the new kickoff rules, I think you do want more running back than wide receiver, but Toney has decent vision. He's quick. He's shifty. I think you put him back there with Luis Rizamet. I think you're pretty happy with that. I think you're thrilled with that. So if that's the case, your wide receiver 4, 5, or 6, a lot of time their biggest impact is going to be on special teams. I don't want Sky Moore back there. I don't want Sky Moore as a return man. I like Sky Moore more as a consistent wide receiver than Toney. I do. I think his floor as a wide receiver is higher. But wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6 doesn't really matter. You're not going to see the field very much. I think Toney might have a better chance of making an impact, and it's going to be on special teams. Maybe you choose Sky to play in the slot early on in the season because that's where he was supposed to be playing all along. That's where he can actually at least make somewhat of a useful player. But I don't know, man. Like, does Toney become redundant when you have Worthy and Hollywood Brown? Does he become too redundant? I think you're really looking at Nico Remigio as well, making the roster as a special team. I mean, there are a lot of different ways this could play out with McCole Hardman now back. I think only one of these guys makes the roster, and maybe neither does. Maybe neither if Nico Remigio shows out.
I don't think McCole is a lock to make the roster either, by the way. With Kadarius Toney, I think he's a different kind of player. You've seen at times they actually give him handoffs and use him out of the backfield. He can be a good receiver out of the backfield. He runs very hard. He's very physical when he's a runner with the ball. That's actually a little bit surprising because I think people think he's perhaps made of glass. But when he's on the field, he is a very physical player. And I think that will translate well given the new kickoff rules. And I also think he can be more of a gadget player than Sky Moore can. We've seen Sky Moore be okay on some of those jet sweeps and end arounds. He's serviceable. He's not dynamic. I think Kadarius Toney has an extra gear, has a little bit more oomph in that kind of role. But we're talking about a specialist, whether it's special teams or, gimmick touches, 3 or 4 a game. He's not a guy that you're going to feel comfortable feeding the ball to during crunch time because his hands and his brain are just completely untrustworthy. We saw him. I mean, really, he lost 2 games last year between the Detroit game where he gave them a pick 6 if I'm remembering that correctly. And then the Buffalo game where he inexplicably lined up offsides and ruined maybe the signature play between Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, which would have been one of the all-time memorable highlights of this dynasty that we'd still be talking about 20 years from now. I don't think they should call that. I think it's stupid that they decided to wipe away one of the biggest moments and one of the biggest games of the year for something they never called. But dude, you have to line up on sides. That should be at minimum something you're able to do here. And Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore just can't seem to pull their heads out of their asses. I mean, that's just frankly what we're looking at with those two dudes.
I have an idea.
Okay, let's hear it.
We've been looking for a third running back for the Chiefs. Kadarius Toney out of the backfield.
I don't hate it. He never really was a
I'm kidding, but like only slightly. It's like when we joked about Justin Reed doing kickoffs, and then now it's like, okay, Justin Reed might be doing kickoffs with the new rules. It's like, yeah, well, Toney can't catch the ball. Wait a minute. What if we could get him the ball without him having to catch it?
I mean, he's always been a little Cordero Patterson-esque as a prospect. He never was one of these guys where you're like, oh, this guy just gets the receiver position. He's got that innate feel to get open and run routes. That's just never been Kadarius Toney. It's all been get the ball in his hands and see what happens. So, yeah, he's not a full-time running back. He might be a hybrid, though. He might be a hybrid who you can put back there a little bit. Maybe you can give him a few of those Jet McKinnon touches. I'm talking like 3 or 4 touches a game where he just gives the Chiefs offense a different element, and you don't have to worry about him having the wherewithal to play the receiver position because he clearly doesn't seem to have that.
Just wanted to point out that I'm very smart and thought of that. So thank you, everyone, for your round of applause. I really thank you. Appreciate it. Angry Drunken German, we appreciate you. Had to call into work to make one of these. I hope you're happy. ADG, I am happy. Okay, I am happy. I'm always happy when you're here.
Over the moon, man. You're one of our most loyal watchers, so we always appreciate you. You make the chat fun, to be frank. Aging Vets.
If you're Frank, then I want to be Adam.
Okay, we can do that.
I was talking about PFF and stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, that's all I talk about. Aging Vets, our last category. Let's start with Joe Thuney. I think this is an important season for Joe Thuney because coming off that torn pec, it's no guarantee that he is the same dominant force at, 32-ish? He's getting up there that he's been in the past, and you won't find a bigger Joe Thuney supporter than me, but I just don't think it's any guarantee that he'll come back and be the dominant Iron Man who is the most dependable pass blocker in football. If you look at things like pass block win rate, he has been the most elite player on the offensive line, better than anybody the past couple years. So what is the ceiling for Joe Thuney? What is the floor? And do you think there's any chance the Chiefs might decide to wiggle out of that contract?
I think he's back to being a stud next year, and I don't think the Chiefs wiggle out of it. I think Joe Thuney's here this year. I think he's here next year. His contract in 2025 looks like it's, the same? I'm trying to see how it breaks down. Basically, $16 million AAV. The cap hit's large, so they might restructure. I think they might even extend Joe Thuney. It costs almost $11 million if they're going to cut him next year. I don't see Joe Thuney playing anywhere else in 2024 or 2025. I think Joe Thuney is going to play his years 32 and 33 as a Kansas City Chief. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if they extended him to bring the cap hit down, right, to kind of rearrange. And all of a sudden, he's here in 2026. Like, I get your concern about the injury. I do. Dog has played through a broken hand and still played as an all-pro. Like, he's an Iron Man. I am not worried at all about Joe Thuney. Like, I think he's a Chief for at least 2 more years, if not 2026 and on. Because I have not seen a drop-off. And maybe it all changes with the pec and all. Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right, Best. But offensive linemen can typically play longer And based on how I see the contract currently playing out, I think he's a Chief for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I'm mainly just playing devil's advocate here. In the past, I've argued pretty passionately that he is the fourth most important Chief, and nobody really talks about him as such. But I actually shared a video today on Twitter of him blocking Aaron Donald one-on-one in the Super Bowl with the Patriots before he came to Kansas City. And then you see Aaron Donald, after Joe Thuney basically beats him 2 times during a pivotal drive, say, dude, that's on me. I had a one-on-one and I let that guy beat me. I let that guy contain me. That's how good Joe Thuney is. That's how good he's been in Kansas City as well. And I expect he's been an Iron Man, so I expect him to rebound. I don't think he's going anywhere. And the Chiefs have shown you money talks, right, with their behavior. They keep borrowing from the bank of Joe Thuney. They keep restructuring and kicking the can down the road and they keep making that contract harder to get out of. So what does that tell you? Beyond Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, and Patrick Mahomes, this is the guy that they are most comfortable with being a stable force in this dynasty. It doesn't get talked about a lot, but I think Brett Veach's behavior points to that reality, right?
Could not agree more. Also, shout out to Mile High Luke, bringing Chiefs vibes from Denver. Love that. Love that.
Oh, that is a burden to bear, but we appreciate you, sir. From behind enemy lines, you're doing your thing. Major props to you. Let's get into Justin Reid, our final guy here. And I think it's the same kind of situation as Nick Bolton. I want to start out by saying you won't find a player who's smarter than Justin Reid.
Now you're saying nice things about him, huh?
Oh, I've always said nice things about him. And actually, since we're getting into this, my original point with Justin Reid was good player, great against the run, great blitzer, one of the smartest players in the league, good leader, all those things. Average in coverage. And I think that's fair to say. And when he's being played like a top 10 player at his position, and when the Chiefs have limited cap and they're spending that much on a safety at a time when Denver is just letting Justin Simmons, just cutting Justin Simmons, and nobody is picking Justin Simmons up. And as much as people like Justin Reid, I don't think there's an argument that any argument at all that Justin Reid is better than Justin Simmons. So I think it's just a positional value thing. And it's just, is this what the Chiefs should be investing in with their limited resources? And it's the same situation with Nick Bolton. They have championship swagger coming out of their ass. They have leadership. They have intangibles. They have that kind of stable six in Spags, Andy, Brett Veach, Pat, Chris, and Travis. They don't need to overpay for leadership or intelligence or any of those things or championship swagger. I could see another team looking at Justin Reid and coming off this contract and saying, we need to siphon off some of that Chiefs championship swagger. We need a leader who is going to do what, if you're Jacksonville, you're looking at someone like him and saying, we need someone to do for our defense and our locker room what Tyrann Mathieu did for the Chiefs in 2019. I don't think it's going to be the Chiefs. I think he'll probably have a similar year. He'll be great against the run. He'll be a very good blitzer. He'll be a leader. He'll be all right in coverage. And the Chiefs,
well, if he's going all right, then I have concerns because I want a safety who can also go left.
Oh boy. But I think we can both agree here that regardless of what you think about Justin as a player, the Chiefs just do not bring back defensive backs of his age. They always let them walk or trade them. They didn't bring back the Badger, Snead, Ward, Thornhill, Marcus Peters. There's a clear pattern here. Part of their special sauce is drafting and developing players in the defensive backfield and keeping it cheap, right? Having high performance. They have one of the better secondaries in the league, and it's one of the cheaper secondaries in the league. That is part of how the Chiefs afford all these expensive parts. So I think it's going to be a similar conversation with Steve Spagnuolo, but I'm with you. I think he will probably prioritize if he's looking at which leader of the defense do we need to keep around more. Nick Bolton, he doesn't really have an alternative. The Chiefs drafted Jaden Hicks. I don't know how they got him where they got him because he was very highly rated by draft gurus, but I think they have a replacement here where they don't have another option for Nick Bolton.
That's what it comes down to is the Chiefs have perpetually replenished the safety and cornerback and secondary rooms. They keep doing it, and they keep hitting on guys. I love Justin Reed. I think he is so much more valuable than just the numbers and the PFF coverage grades and all that stuff. Like, I think Justin Reed is a real difference maker. I really believe that. And again, some of it is the intangibles. Some of it is the leadership. But I'm also a guy that believes in some of that stuff more than others. I do. I actually like it from Bout Time. Says with the new kickoff rules, Reed's value will increase. Just my opinion. I think that's a good point too. If he's a stud as a kicker, literally that might be the difference of him staying.
You don't want Harrison Butker tackling, really? I mean, you don't.
Yeah,
so I get that.
And so I'm intrigued. If Justin Reed got re-signed and extended, would I be surprised? Slightly, because of all the young safeties they have drafted and developed up to this point. But they also rock with a lot of 3 safeties. They do. If Chamari Connor's playing more or less in the slot and you're using him more as a slot corner, well, maybe you do keep Justin Reed and then Brian Cook and Jaden Hicks. Like, I think there's a wide array of outcomes for Justin Reed. I think we were very quick to say he's probably gone. And again, I was in that camp too. But it all depends on where they viewed Chamari Connor, where they viewed Jaden Hicks, and where they view Brian Cook coming back from injury. There are a lot of factors.
Yeah.
Justin Reed could almost be like Mike Dana, where you think he's gone, and then he's back. Because I could see that being a very similar situation, although one is a starter and one's more of a rotational guy. I think they could have a similar situation.
Don't you agree with me, though, that we might not see it eye to eye on how much the Chiefs should value these intangibles because of how much championship swagger is present elsewhere in this franchise? But I think another team is going to look at Justin Reed and say that could be a transformative player in our defense, in our locker room, because of his leadership, his experience, his intelligence, his attitude, his kind of lunch pail style as a player. And they're going to value him more than the Chiefs. The Chiefs, if you talk about perpetually reloading at wide receiver, they do it here too. They keep drafting these guys. They have Brian Cook. I could not be higher on Chamari Connor. I thought last year he was already, in my eyes, the best coverage safety the Chiefs had. I think he is already that level of a player. So if they have Brian Cook, they have Chamari Connor, they have Jaden Hicks, they could always draft somebody else. I just don't see how they afford him. But, this might be a situation similar to Nick Bolton where Steve Spagnuolo says, this is a guy that, hey, maybe the rest of the league doesn't value as much as I do, but I need him to make my defense tick and to have kind of another coach on the field.
Final thought. Safety market's been getting depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Safety market's not what it once was. You mentioned Justin Simmons. Geno Stone signed for $7.5 million. I thought Geno Stone was getting closer to 13 or 14 mil per year. That was shocking to me. If Geno Stone's getting that, and for those that don't know, he was a Raven, very good player, PFF loved, but a very talented player with the Ravens. He's young. I thought he was getting paid. He did not. If the safety market stays the way it's at, and then you're looking at a 2 for 14, would Justin Reed take that? We'll find out. I mean, if you're already getting paid 14 plus mil per year, now they ask you to take almost a half pay cut. Who knows? But with the way the guard market and wide receiver market has exploded, seems like teams are taking from safety and running back, obviously. If that's the case, then Reed might come back as a Chief, and he's younger than you think. He's still 27 years old for how long he's played in the NFL. It's pretty impressive. Just want to play a little, like you said, devil's advocate here. Call me Dante.
Well, hey, I don't dislike players. I dislike contracts. And if you get him for half the price, he goes from being, in my opinion, a little overpaid to a hell of a bargain. So it just depends. You did point out that, and I agree with you, in some ways the safety market is depressed, but it's a little funky because Antoine Winfield, the young safety down in Tampa Bay, got 4 years, $84 million. So it is just kind of an unpredictable market. And the way I kind of look at it is young safeties are really valuable. And when these guys get to be 28, 29, pushing 30, franchises tend to value them a little bit less. We saw this with Diggs in Seattle as well. I don't know if you mentioned him. I was looking up Winfield's contract, but it will be interesting. I tend to think the Chiefs are just so good at evaluating these guys that it doesn't matter who you are. And that it's early to talk about this, but I'm not so sure they'll bring Trent McDuffie back when it's his time to be resigned.
Oh, bleep you. We're done here. All right. This was the Arrowhead Addict podcast. Adam Best is a hater. Sterling Holmes, you can follow on Twitter at HomestretchKC. You can yell at Adam Best at Arrowhead_Adam. No nuance. We're not here for nuance. We're here to yell at Adam. No, Best. Great show today. That was a lot of fun, and I appreciate you setting this up and going through this list together. Really enjoyed it. I hope everyone who's listening enjoyed this as well. If you want to give us a 5-star review, I would really appreciate it. Adam would really appreciate it. Everyone at Arrowhead Addict would really appreciate it. Drop us a like on YouTube. Subscribe as well. Best, you can take us out. I know I just did that, but that's because I was angry at you and I couldn't let you get one more word in. But say something nice before you get out of here.
I mean, I think the Chiefs are the best franchise in the league. You know, I believe in their philosophy. Even, you know, what more can you say? Actually, I believe we're off next week. But when we come back 2 weeks from now, if I'm getting my dates right,
I think you're right.
We will be back to our normal time at 5 p.m. Central. Thanks for joining us, chat members, all you guys. We can't do this without you. Until our next show, go Chiefs.